radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Welcome, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Today is Wednesday, March 8th, and tonight our guest is Staci Layne Wilson. We're going to be discussing, amongst other things, but my two favorite subjects, music and the paranormal. She's a multi-award-winning author, journalist, and filmmaker specializing in rock music history. She's a Hollywood historian and author of the best-selling Gen X memoir, So L.A. And also, she's the creator of the Rock and Roll Nightmares book series, and she directed a movie that I love, and you need to check it out. It's a documentary called The Ventures, Stars on Guitars. She has interviewed David Crosby, John Fogerty, Jimmy Page, Joni Mitchell, Rob Zombie, Cherie, Currie, and Gene Simmons, and many others. And I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, Staci Layne Wilson. Staci, good evening. How are you?
How are you?
Fantastic. And it's great to have you on the show. But before we get things started, you get the first time guest disclaimer. Okay.
Okay. I'm bracing myself.
Yeah, here we go. Staci, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, it ends. But we're going to end as friends. See? That wasn't too rough, was it?
I can live with that quite easily.
Accepted, right? Accept.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We can click on that. This is actually where I want to start. For you, growing up, what came first, music or nightmares?
Well, they might be somewhat intertwined. Music, probably, because my dad is Don Wilson of The Ventures, so from conception, I guess you could say I had the music in me, but there was that. And then also, but my dad and my mom loved horror movies and scary books and things like that. So I was always indulged in those things too. I remember my dad letting me stay up really late to watch The Pit and the Pendulum starring Vincent Price. And, he loved all those Universal monsters and the Vincent Price movies and stuff like that. So I think that's probably where it all started. And my mom loved to read Stephen King. So I got to read a lot of those books when I was probably far too young. Of course, read Helter Skelter and Hollywood Babylon and all those books that were popular then, the true crime books.
Now, were you exposed? Were you exposed a lot into the instrumental surf music scene? Well, I can even take instrumental off and just say surf music. And did that dominate things, or did you venture? I said it. Into other types of rock and roll.
Oh, to be honest, when you're a kid and you're growing up, your parents are just totally uncool. So to me, the Ventures weren't Led Zeppelin, say. I mean, that was my favorite band. I love Led Zeppelin and the Doors and Jimi Hendrix and the Rolling Stones. And, so I didn't fully appreciate the Ventures until I got older, and then really came into the full flower of appreciation through making the documentary, because I interviewed so many musicians that I grew up loving, like Jimmy Page and John Fogerty, who you mentioned. Billy Bob Thornton is also a big fan of the Ventures. So I interviewed a lot of people, and they all were just so effusive in their love and appreciation of the Ventures, and how the band really got them to pick up the guitar and to love it. And I learned a lot through actually the interviewees. So even while I was making the film, just gained a different level of appreciation for the Ventures and what they did for rock music and the bands that I loved. I mean, even Anthrax is, loves the Ventures. Scott Ian, being a rhythm guitarist, thanked the Ventures in the liner notes of one of their albums and said, the Ventures have done so much for thrash metal. And so it was really great to kind of get that sort of re-education through the eyes of other people.
I had mentioned to you in an email, I said, every musician, every guitar player has got a Venture story. It doesn't really matter the style of music. Everybody's got a Venture story, and not that I'm going to bore everybody with my own, but
what is yours? No, I want to know.
My mom had a child of the 60s, had a pretty extensive album collection of the Dave Clark Five and the Ventures. Right? and so I'm flipping through, I'm like, how many albums can a band make? Right. There's all these Ventures. And me being a guitar player, I was very young, started listening to it. And my Venture story is this: the guitar tones were different. And that's what caught me. That caught me very early on. It was a percussive thing. It was an aggressive thing. It was and gnarly is the word I'm looking for, right? There was this thing about attacking the strings and getting tone that way. And I heard that, and I've never changed. And I think a lot of guitar players will actually talk about that exact thing. It's about, the right hand has so much effect on tone, and that's what the Ventures did. And you could hear it on nearly every track.
Right. I mean, Dickerson, who has Ventures Mania among his many groups, he was in the documentary also talking about how Noki Edwards is really a punk guitarist, and he was punk in the early 60s. And he referenced quite a few different concerts, but the Ventures in Japan, 1966, is like a really bombastic, hard concert. And a lot of people think of the Ventures, with Hawaii Five-0 or something like that, that's kind of light and an earworm and fun to listen to. But there are some songs that are really rock.
It's hard. It's hardcore.
Yeah.
And punk is the right word. And if you go back to a lot of that early surf stuff, I'll tell you, I'm going to say this. Pulp Fiction did more to expose the attitude of that, right, to the masses. Mm-hmm. And this eerie thing, this aggressive. Now, you're right. It can be ear candy. It's how you want to perceive it. But really underlying there is a definite attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that was brought up again and again when I was conducting the interviews was the fact that, even though there may be fancier guitar players like Jimi Hendrix or, Yngwie Malmsteen or Ed Van Halen, somebody like that, young guitarists really sort of gravitate toward the Ventures because there are no vocals to get in the way of the purity of the guitar and the music. And that's really how they kind of led quite a few people that wanted to learn how to play guitar just by ear, basically. But they also had learn how to play guitar with the Ventures albums. I think they had 3 of them in the top 100 of the Billboard, which is kind of unheard of, how to play guitar records being that popular.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me ask you this. Your dad being who he is, did your parents have a ghost in the house? Did you ever talk to them about these subjects?
Ghost, of course. Yeah. I mean, well, my parents divorced when I was very young, and my dad was actually married, I think 8 times. I kind of lost count, but so I did not grow up with my dad, but I saw, my dad as I was growing up. But yes, in that late 70s, early 80s, he had a girlfriend named Debbie, and she actually died in his house on New Year's Eve. Turned out that she had an ectopic pregnancy that burst, and it was just a really tragic thing. And it was awful. She was wrapping presents in front of the Christmas tree, and this ruptured, and she died. But in the years to follow, this was in his house in Sherman Oaks, which wasn't far from Tom Petty. He was a neighbor. Glenn Campbell was a neighbor. So it was really that kind of hilly area of Sherman Oaks. And so the house was haunted. We all sort of came to believe. My dad had a pool room downstairs, and you would hear like the pool balls going in the middle of the night, and it would sound like someone was playing pool, and you'd go downstairs and the balls would be out on the table, but nobody would be there. And so we all kind of thought it must be Debbie just kind of letting us know she was still there, still with us.
What I have found is that musicians, I'm a musician. I've got most of my friends are musicians, and certainly my career was in the music business. So at one point, everybody that I knew was a musician, but I didn't talk about this stuff with them. And as my life moved on, and I started my career in broadcasting, my musician friends started to reach back out to me. Church, I didn't know you were into this stuff. Let me tell you a story, right? And it just turns out that everybody, and I think it has to do with creativity, the open mind and other things, because you can take yourself into a meditative state when you're writing and practicing and performing, and that opens you up to things that normies don't necessarily get to experience. Do you find that to be true?
I don't know. I mean, I did definitely do. I've known, of course, about Jimmy Page's interest in the occult and David Bowie's interest in Aleister Crowley, of course. I mean, there was the Satanic Panic in the 80s. So that kind of opened up a lot of sort of like the negative aspect of being open to those sorts of things. But I don't know. I think like I might have mentioned to you before, that another film that I directed is called The Second Age of Aquarius, and it's about a rock star who joined the 27 Club in 1970, and he's kind of, he became part of the ethos through his being electrocuted and kind of went into the atmosphere. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to explore. I do feel, though, that being creative and musical is different maybe from being a word person or a mathematic person, because you're kind of open to muses, I think, more when you're doing music, and kind of freer and more open.
For those that don't know, tell everybody what the 27 Club is.
That is a club that most people don't want to be in, but it started, I think, with, it kind of really started with Robert Johnson, the bluesman, who was apparently or allegedly poisoned in the 30s. He was 27 years old, and he has been sort of the catalyst for the legend of the crossroads, the going to the crossroads to sell your soul to the devil for musical talent. And people said that he was just inhumanly talented, and that's how that happened. So when he died at the age of 27, it apparently set off this chain reaction for other extremely talented musicians to die at that age. Brian Jones was one from the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. They all died within 10 months of each other at the age of 27. Amy Winehouse died at 27. Of course, Kurt Cobain, but some people say that he orchestrated that he actually did want to be in the 27 Club. So that's open to interpretation, but it is interesting. I've always found that certain years or dates kind of keep coming up again and again in my research, especially since I've really been immersing myself in the Rock and Roll Nightmares True Stories books. I found that December is a very unlucky month for musicians for whatever reason, but in certain dates, like December 3rd. Buddy Holly died and Ricky Nelson died, and they both, died in plane crashes. Tommy Bolin, who's maybe not very well-known guitarist, but an extremely talented guitarist, he died on December 3rd. So did Scott Weiland. It was the day that, Joe Meek, who produced Telstar, which the Ventures had a big hit with. He murdered someone on December 3rd. And then his rival, Phil Spector, also murdered Lana Clarkson on December 3rd, about 4 years later.
Oh, okay.
And December 8th is another extremely kind of cursed date, which, can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yeah, you faded out there just for a second.
Can you hear me now?
We're okay.
Oh.
Yes.
All right. It's not December 3rd or 8th, is it? It is March 8th. Maybe there's something to that. But December 8th, that's Jim Morrison's birthday. But it's also the day that John Lennon was shot. Uriah Heep's bassist, Gary Thane, he OD'd on December 8th. So did Steve Clark, Def Leppard's guitarist. Pantera's guitarist, Dimebag Darrell, was murdered on December the 8th. Motley Crue's frontman, Vince Neil, he wrecked his car in 1984 and killed his passenger, Hanoi Rocks drummer, Razzle Dingley, on December 8th. And so I don't know if that's ever been a thing that's been brought to light, but I really noticed these dates coming up again and again as I was doing research. So I thought that was very interesting. And so I did make a note of it. I haven't really drawn any conclusions, but I do find it quite fascinating.
There's 364 other days in the year, right?
Yeah.
December 3rd and December 8th. This is the first I've ever heard about it. And I can't wait. I'm sure the chat room is and others are going to make comments. If you know of anything on those dates, December 3rd or December 8th, shoot me an email, post it on social media. I would love to hear more. And
I'd like to know more too. I mean, like I said, it kind of I started noticing this pattern coming up as I was doing the research. And then I did a few searches to see, well, maybe this is a thing that other people have noticed, but I couldn't find anything. So I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, the 27 Club is a very strange one for me. And when I started to look at that over the years, because we all talked about it in the 70s. And, me and my young guitar playing buddies, 13, 14, 15 years old, where you study music, right? Everything about everything. And that was one of the subjects that came up, was the 27 Club. And then it just continued over the years. And I've just been fascinated with that. I'll tell you something else. I want to bring this up really quick. You brought up Dave Grohl. And the movie, right, 666, Studio 666, which I rather enjoyed, but to turn around and right after that movie was done being filmed, Taylor Hawkins dies.
Yeah, that was really, that was a shock to everyone, I think, because he seemed to have gotten himself back together. And it just seemed like he had, everything was going so well for him. But I just saw the movie just shortly before he passed away. So, it was really weird to think back at that death scene. And also, I believe that house is haunted, right? The house that they shot it in.
Yeah, in Encino. And I lived in Sherman Oaks forever. And that community right there, Encino, Tarzana, right? Studio City, Sherman Oaks. We call them by different names, but it's just a tiny little area that, it's just divided by streets, as you know. And Encino is just a couple blocks away, right, from Sherman Oaks. It's right up the street.
Yeah, but it does take about an hour to drive there.
It does
in LA traffic.
You can walk anywhere faster than you can drive in the valley. It is, Hollywood has changed, and so has Sherman Oaks. Like back in the day, Sherman Oaks was a sleepy little, especially when I first moved there. And Hollywood, I watched it change too over the years. And it was about a month ago. Exactly a month ago. I went to the Whiskey to go see a friend of mine's band. And so I'm standing on the corner at the whiskey Jordan Ziff's band, Hot Crazy Band. It's a really hot crazy band. So I'm standing on the corner of the whiskey, and I used to live on that corner of Clark and Sunset Boulevard, and I'm looking up towards Gil Turner's and thinking to myself how different this is, because from 1980 until 1990 there was 10,000 people on that sidewalk. You know how packed it was, and what a different vibe it is. Do you feel the music vibe is left Hollywood, or is it still here?
I don't think it is really. I mean, there is one band that I really love called The Cocks that is kind of a gay punk rock band, and they're hilarious. They write really funny lyrics, very talented. But that's really the only band I can think of that's come up lately that I've really loved. I find that I've moved to Las Vegas in the past 3 years ago. I moved here, and I find that the music scene is really moving here. I'm seeing a lot of great bands coming up, and also musicians that lived in Hollywood here and starting bands. And there's a great live music scene. I do feel like it's changed quite a bit. I do remember back in the 80s going to the Rainbow and the Whiskey and the Roxy and Gazzari's, and you could see a great band any night of the week. Go down to the Troubadour, there'd be even more bands, and it just seems less creative now. Or maybe it's just more harder to find venues to play in, or people just aren't coming out. Like you said, it was very alive. It was almost New Yorkish. You could walk down the streets of Sunset Boulevard and you'd see people, and you could people watch. They'd be dressed to the nines. But yeah, now it's quite a different story. It's really, people don't go out as much as they used to.
Yeah, it's empty, and you're right about that. I mean, it was 7 nights a week. Every club there, the Whiskey, the Roxy, Gazzari's, the Troubadour. That area right there, it was 4 or 5 bands a night every night of the week. And we're talking about, Guns N' Roses and Poison and Warrant and 1,000 other,
great bands that. Absolutely. And Ron Keel introduced us.
Yeah.
It's different. I don't know. Maybe they're all on TikTok now.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Well, Ron Keel's a great example of that, because Ron, who I met early on when I came to LA, I met him a long time ago through a mutual friend of ours, Gina Zamparelli, and she's no longer with us. Hello, Gina, if you're listening. And Ron was a central part of what was happening in the scene back then. And so, and Yngwie Malmsteen, right, as a classic example of that, and Keel and Steeler and such great respect. But the image that he had, we all just looked up to Ron. He may not even know it, but let me tell you something. Everybody respected Ron Keel, and he attracted the best musicians around him too in his bands. Anyway, that's what happened. So years go by, and Ron is listening to the radio and listening to me late at night, and reaches out, and he was like, "Church, I'm into this conspiracy stuff, man. I'm into the paranormal. I'm into UFOs. I'm into all of this stuff." And I was like, everybody is.
Well, I mean, how can you not find it fascinating, even if you're, maybe somewhat more skeptical or practical? I feel like I'm of two minds on that, kind of like Fox Mulder. I want to believe, but I don't know if I do. But there have been, like I said, some undeniable experiences, of course, with my dad's ghost, but also, throughout the years, I used to work as an entertainment reporter, and I worked for the Sci-Fi Channel. As a red carpet reporter, and I would go to set visits. And of course, we did set visits in some sort of haunted places. One of the most interesting structures was the Linda Vista Hospital in Boyle Heights, which I'm sure you've seen and been to, and I have been there many times. And there were some strange things happening. I did quite a few set visits there, but it would often be that your recorded interviews with the talent would be mysteriously erased or garbled when you got home to transcribe them. I mean, it was eerie, and there was definitely a feel to that place, but it's also just like a beautiful masterpiece of filthy history. I don't know if you were there, like when it was kind of very run down, a lot of broken glass all over the floor and just graffiti everywhere. And that boiler room downstairs where they shot some of A Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy Krueger's boiler room. But there's also been some really cool music videos shot there. I mean, we'll bring back Dave Grohl with Foo Fighters, Best of You was shot there, and the Duran Duran videos. And so there's a lot of really great kind of haunted areas that you can't deny. There's something there. There's some kind of residue
Let me stop you right there. That is the most haunted place in Los Angeles, maybe the world. That is a creepy, you just look at it and you know that you shouldn't go in there.
I went in there quite a few times, but it's also got a certain beauty to it. There's an allure to it,
It's great architecture.
Yeah.
It's and it's a period type of architecture that says Los Angeles for sure.
Yeah.
But it's haunted. I mean, there's no question about it. Do you feel like when you walk in there, do you feel a presence?
No, honestly, I must be like just have blinders on or something, because I have a friend. I went to New Orleans with a friend of mine who's very sensitive to these things. And we went to, of course, New Orleans is one of the most haunted cities in the world. And we would go to places and she'd say, "Oh, I feel so eerie, there's something here," or she'd feel like a warm embrace, like, "Oh, there's benevolent spirits here," and I'd be like, I don't feel it. So I guess that's good. I don't get woken up by a ghost in the middle of the night or anything like that. They may be here, but I don't know.
There are certain places that I've got a ghost. Okay, I've got a ghost here. And I think I have. I've made peace. I'm not here to aggravate, and I'm not here to get scared, but I don't want to elevate things. But there are certain things that I just won't do when it comes to ghosts. And I don't want to be scared. I don't want to act like I'm a chicken or give that impression, but I'm not going to go into certain places. I'm not going to go into a haunted jail. I'm not going to do it alone. A certain, a house or something that you know what I mean? I just don't do that. I'll do it with friends, but I'm not going to wander these places by myself.
Okay, well, I did that at Linda Vista, and I'm still here. It's all good. But yeah, a friend of mine who lived in a Hollywood apartment, one of those old, 1920s Hollywood apartments. She was sick a lot, and she had a lot of problems. And she thought, well, maybe my place has got black mold or something. And apparently, like, someone came in and said, "Oh no, you have this malevolent spirit living here, and he lives in your closet and in your bedroom." I'm like, man, that must suck. Like, bringing home dates. Is the ghost like perving on you? Or I don't know. I'd be like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know if the ghost is watching me do things.
So a friend of mine, let's go back to the Strip for a second. His name is Paul D'Armes, and he is a hairstylist and an artist, and incredible. And so he did White Snake's hair, right? He was responsible for all these.
David Coverdale just cut his hair. Did you see that? Everyone's up in arms.
He caved. He tapped out. He finally tapped out. He looks pretty good though. Totally different. I mean, did he change? I mean, he just looked.
Yeah.
He looked distinguished and grown up all of a sudden. Anyway, so Paul D'Armes buys Marilyn Monroe's old condo in Hollywood on the corner of Doheny and Sunset. It's a nice place, right? So, and I used to stay there all the time. And he had it was massive wooden floors. And his bedroom was upstairs. I would always crash on his couch after a late night. And one morning he comes down and I go, dude, who was here last night? And he goes, nobody, just me and you. I go, do you wear high heels? Oh, that's the ghost of Marilyn Monroe. I go, what? I had no idea. And he goes, no, this is Marilyn Monroe's old place. And I didn't know. It was kind of mentioned to me when I bought it, but the Hollywood tours, the buses, right, would stop by in front and everybody would be taking pictures. And I'd be out on the patio and I would wave. And then finally somebody said, that's Marilyn Monroe's old place that you bought. Oh, really? So anyway,
Well, she makes the rounds because apparently she also haunts the Roosevelt Hotel. And I interviewed actually Ed and Lorraine Warren there for a film that they were consultants on. And we did the interview in the Marilyn Monroe suite where apparently she hangs out. So she's a mobile ghost.
Anything happen when you were there?
No, that didn't. But like I said, it was kind of eerie though that at any interview that I ever did at the Linda Vista was always mysteriously garbled, or you didn't record anything at all. So that was kind of weird.
Yeah, most of my ghost hunting friends, guests on the show, they talk about that a lot. Batteries get interfered with, the video gets interfered with, the audio gets interfered with, and it's just something that they have to, deal with. It just goes with the territory. It goes with the job of ghost hunting that stuff is going to happen. So if you're going to Linda Vista or something like that, I could see that.
Yeah, it's not so good when you're a reporter, though, trying to remember what people said. You don't want to misquote anybody.
Did you get a chance with Jimmy Page to get off the subject of the ventures and discuss anything paranormal?
No, I don't think he really wants to talk about Aleister Crowley anymore. He's kind of over it. But no, I didn't. But it was interesting though to do some more research on him for the books, and to kind of he bought the Equinox bookstore and he ran that for a while. And there was of course like the backwards masking with Stairway to Heaven, the big to do over that in the 80s, I believe. And so I think it kind of burned him out on his enthusiasm for the paranormal to talk to anyone about that sort of thing. But so I did interview him about the ventures, and then also for his film It Might Get Loud with my other favorite guitarist, Jack White. So that was really quite a wonderful day for me.
That was Guggenheim, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I interviewed Davis Guggenheim as well.
Yeah. He's a pretty cool dude. I know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
He's a good guy. Let me back up for a second. I was just going to I had a Jimmy Page comment. The Aleister Crowley house at Loch Ness, it burnt down.
The Boleskine house?
Yeah.
Well, it's burnt down twice. It burnt down a long time ago, and then it burnt down again, I believe, in 2014, but it's being rebuilt by an Aleister Crowley acolyte who's wanting to turn it into a museum now.
This is what I was going to say. So Jimmy Page said, it's a great interview, but it was this little clip. He said, so, when this backward masking thing came up and with Led Zeppelin, I just stopped and said, gotta understand, it's hard enough to write songs forward.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant.
One direction, let alone two.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I like the way he blew that off, and it made a lot of sense. But the aspects of this, when we look at bands like Black Sabbath or Judas Priest or even Led Zeppelin, and these connections to the Satanic Panic, it was a lot of frustration put on musicians that weren't asking for it, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was the case against Judas Priest for the supposed backward masking of Better by You, Better Than Me, which isn't even written by them. It was written by Gary Wright of Dreamweaver fame. So that song, ironically, that they covered, and they didn't really even want to cover it. It was kind of an afterthought for that album, and they put it on there. And then they kind of ran into this whole entanglement. They had to go to court in Nevada, against, they were sued by the parents of two young men who shot themselves in the face after listening to that song on loop. Stained Class, though, was the album, and they listened to that, and then they went and shot themselves. There's actually an interesting PBS documentary that you can find on YouTube, and you can watch the whole thing. But yeah, it was really something that they didn't ask for. They weren't looking for it. They didn't want it to happen. And, they weren't really courting any kind of controversy. And that was a kind of a unfortunate thing that happened. But the court did eventually throw that case out. And there were quite a few cases around that time. I mean,
yeah, the whole tip. Well, you had Tipper Gore and the labeling and
Right.
all of that stuff that was happening. I talked to Rob Halford at length about this, and he said, excuse me, he had said that was one of the most traumatic things he had ever been through in his life, to go into court because you had these two, young boys, young men, kill themselves. And
Right.
that's tragic enough right there. And to listen to the details of this and the emotions from the family and the way that they tried to project it and then put it back on. And he had to sit through this day. He showed up in court. He was in court for all of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And KK Downing, too.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
he
he
said it
talked
was
about
just,
that in his book. I mean, it was awful because the young man who eventually succumbed to his injuries, he lived for a few years with a horribly disfigured face, and he had to wear a baby bib because his mouth was so disfigured that he couldn't, he was drooling constantly. It was just like he could barely speak, and it was a horrible thing to have to witness someone, that happened to after listening to their music. I'm sure they had to feel terrible about it, but thankfully, the courts did see things properly and for the right ways.
how bored do you have to be to listen to music backwards?
I don't know. Or how stoned do you have to be?
Yeah. Tipper Gore stoned? No.
Right. But the thing was that the two young men that shot themselves, they were not listening to the music backward. Apparently there was backward masking. When you played it forward, it said, do it, do it, do it, which doesn't even say to shoot yourself. But do you remember the manager, I can't remember his name, but making a comment like, hey, if we were going to put hidden messages in the music, we'd say, hey, buy 7 copies and not kill yourself.
Yeah, I used to listen to that stuff. There was a trend of this. I'm not going to go deep into this, but there was a trend with this in the 90s. And not only in the music, but also outside of that too as well, in ghosts and the paranormal and things. And I could never hear it. I could imagine it, right? You know what I mean? I could, okay, all right, kind of. But no, it never sounded like what they said, with the power of suggestion.
Mm-hmm, right.
That's what it was. But I never heard it. Even in the Judas Priest, the Do It. I
didn't hear that one at all. I mean, you could kind of hear My Sweet Satan in the Stairway to Heaven backwards, but only if you were really like straining to and hoping to hear that. I mean,
smoking weed.
This is, yeah.
They'd be smoking weed. Now, the other thing that I want to get to before the break is that to write, everybody has a Pandora's box thought of getting stuck into a nightmare that you can't get out of, right? And that aspect of the ultimate thing that scares you. But you are able to put this into words. How did you? Where do you get it? Where does it come from?
Well, I started off writing fiction horror, and also I've always really been into horror films. So that was something that the genre I've always been drawn to. But I think it's more the psychological aspect than the actual gore of it. I want to know why people do the things they do. And that's really what draws me to true crime, is the psychological aspect and what brings people to the things that they do. So that to me is, the psychology of it is what really draws me.
Do you there's a comparison here to Tropic Thunder, believe it or not. Okay, now I'm going to tie it.
Okay, great film.
I just watched it. Last week, and there's a director's cut out.
I have it. Yeah.
It's pretty good. Yeah, the party scene, that whole
that's fully extended.
Yeah, I mean, it's long, and well, anyway, but that scene, never go all in. You never go all in, right?
Yes, you're paraphrasing there, but
I don't want to say the words, but that's. I always thought about with horror writing and that type of thing that you have to get into the character. You have to develop the mind. You have to deliver that. Is there danger in that? Did you ever think about how far to go?
No, I don't write extreme horror, but I love to kind of look into kind of the black mirror, if you will. Some of the Rock and Roll Nightmares books are fictional, so it's really fun to kind of put yourself into that mindset of the rock star's world and the dark arts that go with it. So it's fun to dip into that. But, like I say on my Twitter profile, not a serial killer, despite my search history. So, yeah, I think if anything, it makes you, kind of go the other way. So, what I do is that I give money to charity for anyone who buys Rock and Roll Nightmares books. A portion of the proceeds goes to charity, the Sweet Relief Musicians Fund. So I feel like I'm kind of keeping my karmic checks and balances in order by doing that.
Yeah, I've often thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. Yeah, it is exploitive, and it is. But I want to bring kind of my own sensibility to it. So. For instance, I got a really nice compliment the other day from a reader who said that the Rock and Roll Nightmares True Stories, that I bring a woman's perspective to it. And so I also bring sort of the victim's perspective to it, and not just exploiting the crimes or the evil deeds.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, this is my Pandora's box. This is my nightmare. This is my rock and roll nightmare. Is if anything tragically happens, right, to me, what are they going to see when they kick down the front door? Right? What are they going to see? So, am I going to be clothed? Or am I going to have a bowl of Captain Crunch or something in my boxers? What's the last thing that's going to be on the TV? What is going to be out? And what is my search history on the computer? Right?
Exactly. Right.
What is it that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's that funny medical bracelet that says delete my browser history.
First.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know, but the fascination with true crime and with terrible things happening is certainly nothing new. It's just come to the internet now. But when you think about the lions and the Christians, the Romans watching people die, or the Salem witch trials, where there would be massive crowds to watch the witches be burned. I mean, my goodness, that's far more hardcore than what we're doing, writing or reading true crime.
I want to go back to Kurt Cobain, if I could. His death and how it happened and how his body was found, all of that, I think left the door open to a lot of questions, very difficult to answer, right? No witnesses, nothing like that.
Definitely. Yeah. There's some really strange questions around that.
Can we talk about that? Are you comfortable?
Well, I'm not an expert on it. I'm not sure how I feel about, the whole Courtney conspiracy theory part of it. I don't know. I mean, I kind of am leaning more toward the fact that, or the belief that he did commit suicide. That's what I'm thinking.
How and why?
Well, because he was a drug addict, and they do call them mind-altering substances for a reason. You may do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do. Really, depression can put people in a horrible mindset. I mean, I think about Robin Williams, who's another person that I interviewed multiple times, always seemed so bright and on and really connected. And how could he kill himself? He had children, I mean, there's so many things to live for. But depression really makes people believe that they're doing their loved ones a favor by taking themselves out of the equation. It's such a, it's unrelatable to me. I can't imagine being in that sort of mindset, but depression really does chemically alter your brain and it makes you think things that are not true. Your mind lies to you.
Yeah, that's true. And then when I put myself in the mind of the way that the situation that you've got a newborn child, you are changing rock and roll and world history, you're admired, you're certainly not worrying about money anymore. What is it? There's something else going on there. And that's the part that, it opens up the conspiracy theories, behind something like that. And I've never quite resolved it. I mean, how tragic, and suicide that's something else that is talking to you. And unless you're going through it, we don't know
Yeah.
what that is.
I do not suffer from depression, so I can't
Right.
possibly understand what that feels like, but I try to understand through research and talking to people that have been depressed, and certainly psychologists, psychiatrists. I try to learn all that I can about it. But my grandfather, my dad's dad, committed suicide. He killed himself. My mom's brother killed himself. He shot himself. He was sick. He was terminally ill. So, there are various reasons why people do these things. Something that I've never considered, never thought about, but I try to be sympathetic and try to understand the mindset. But yeah, it's really quite sad, when you think about it.
Well, and then,
Because the mind, telling you that, oh, well, that your people are better off without you. You might as well just check out.
and Chris Cornell.
Yeah.
Chris Cornell. And, I toured with the guy for the better part of a year, a little over a year. And like to think that, I knew him and what a cool guy and a great singer and a great talent. But the way that he did it, that was bizarre. He just finished a show. Right? I mean,
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was really odd. I don't know. And then sometimes there's some possibilities, like if you think about Michael Hutchins, was that autoerotic asphyxiation? Did he really mean to kill himself? But he also, had a lot of problems after he was in a very bad accident. A taxi driver apparently, hit him in the head and he fell and he hit his head on the cement and he was never the same after that. He had a traumatic brain injury, so that might have led him to suicide.
Jani Lane.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was a very strange case where a note was found in his pocket. I am Jani Lane with I think it was his phone number or something on there, but apparently friends would sometimes put, because I think he lost his ID or something like that. He didn't have a driver's license. So just in case something happened, friends would try to put some kind of ID on him in case he was wound up in jail or he passed out and didn't know where he was. But yeah, there's just a lot of really bizarre stories that, maybe you and I can't personally relate to, but try to understand and be sympathetic of.
You have to. And Hollywood is never short of stories like this.
No, I mean, they don't call it the Boulevard of Broken Dreams for nothing.
I mean, the the great parts about Hollywood, and there are many, and I love it. I'm just talking about, the lifestyle and the fun and careers and dreams, and so many come here for different reasons. Maybe you want to be an actor, maybe you want to be a director, maybe you want to be a screenwriter, maybe you want to be a costume designer, whatever it is. And then you have the music business and radio and television and all of those things. So it's a very exciting place. But you can tell that there's some forces that run in the background there too as well. And I think it's nearly tangible, don't you?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
There is okay. Then I'm going to go a little more direct. There are stories that you hear in Hollywood about making deals. And you mentioned Robert Johnson earlier. I'm not necessarily talking about the devil, but that there are certain avenues that you don't go down, and you don't make a deal with that person, or don't do anything over here. And you hear these stories, and that this kind of stuff is running in the background. And then you hear about the tragedy from people that go through depression because they probably made bad decisions.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been women who have compromised themselves throughout the years, casting couch, from the 20s till the present, maybe doing something, or even men. I shouldn't just limit it to women, but, it's more female centric, where you sleep with me and I'll give you a role, and one thing leads to another, and it may seem like something negligible at first, but compromising your principles again and again and again can really be detrimental to one's peace of mind and mental health.
Yeah, that's why that's what I was talking about right there. Okay, so yeah, you got to the question, because I dealt with it. I never got involved but I would hear things. And it was like, no, that can't be real. And then the next thing you know, wow, it was like, man, Hollywood is a trip, man. The music industry is a trip. The film industry is a trip. You can run clean. You can do that. No issues. Mm-hmm. But if you just make a wrong turn somewhere, you've got the Black Dahlia, right?
Right, exactly. Or you think about Lana Clarkson, who was killed by Phil Spector. She was trying to make it for years and years, and she almost made it several times. And then she wound up being a hostess at the House of Blues. And her boss told her, well, you got to treat Phil Spector like gold, to give him whatever he wants. And, who knows, maybe she thought, well, maybe he can help me do something. And that's why she got in the back of that limo with him and went to his house. And, it's just a horrible thing that happened to her. And just, it's really sad, and never should have happened.
Yeah, it's so sad. I remember going back, somebody sent me the timestamp of her in Scarface, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she's an extra, right? But she's dancing on, there's a scene where they're at the club, the Copacabana or whatever it is. And there she is, and I watched a few clips of things that she had done over the years.
Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Fast Times. Yeah. Yeah. And House of Blues. And the next thing you know, it's just crazy. Hollywood is just... Yeah. All right, we need to take a break, so let's get that in right now. Our guest tonight, Staci Layne Wilson. We'll be right back.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Please visit all of our sponsors. We're taking a quick break here. All of the links are below, and we'll be right back.
Check out Billy Carson's Forbidden Knowledge. ForbiddenKnowledge.com or ForbiddenKnowledge.tv, where you can get access to over 6,000 videos, movies, TV series, exclusive documentaries like the Black Knight Satellite. You can do it all for just $7.77 per month or $77 per year after the 3-day trial, which is also totally free to check out. It's all simple to do. Billy Carson is the best. It's simple. ForbiddenKnowledge.com or ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's the number 4BK. On Saturday, April 1st, that's right, April Fool's Day, 2023, I will be hosting the Parapod Festival at the Hyatt Regency right here in Valencia, California. It's a live one-day podcast awards. It's a film festival. It's a full-on media event. We're going to have sky watching. There's going to be a Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Linda Moulton Howe. Right now, you can submit your podcast, your film, your TV series, any of your paranormal media for consideration. You can do all of that on the links below. For info and tickets, go to parapodfilmfest.com. That's parapodfilmfest.com. April 7th through the 14th, 2023, I'll be hosting and presenting on the Hidden Secrets Seminar at Sea Cruise. From Los Angeles to the Mexican Riviera on the Navigator of the Seas. That's right, up top, a giant water slide. You've got to check out the Navigator of the Seas. It's amazing. We've got Scott Walter, Adam Apollo, Nick Pope, Brad Olson, Vivian Chauvet, Jason Shirka, Robert Grant, Ruben Langdon, and another 12 amazing speakers and presenters. It's all simple to do. Just visit divinetravels.com/Hidden Secrets 2023. You know you want to go on a cruise with me. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. Rivermoon Coffee. Our guest tonight, Staci Layne Wilson, and she's an author, she's a filmmaker, and her new documentary, you've got to check it out. It's called The Ventures, Stars on Guitars. It's an incredible documentary. And now, Staci, I'm going to take you out of your wheelhouse now for this next segment.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah. and I'm going to tell you why. First, let me just say this to everybody. I am constantly searching for music documentaries. I watch that, man. I watch everything from the 70s if I can find it, right? And everything new and current that is coming out. And when I found the Ventures documentary, this is before you and I met, and I was like, man, this is awesome. And for me, it wasn't the stuff on the top. It wasn't the fluff. Really got into things, and I really appreciated the way that you approached that documentary. It was very detailed, and I just loved it. Yeah. Well shot too, as well. Well shot. Great interviews. So everybody, I highly recommend it. It's a great documentary. But now I'm going to take you out of your wheelhouse. I want to talk about aliens and UFOs.
Oh, wow. Okay. We'll see.
Yeah. No. I want your opinions on a few things.
Okay.
Because I want your perspective. Okay. And your opinions. The world of alien contact and what may be visiting our planet, and I think that we are being visited, but that's my opinion. But our community for decades has been, when I say our, I really mean this, our community, and it's a big one, has always been ridiculed and teased and tinfoil hat and made fun of, not only by Washington, D.C., the Department of Defense, but just society in general, right? And that has changed. And in the last 5 years, since the New York Times came out with this front page article about the Pentagon having a secret UFO program. And then these videos came out. Now we have legislation that is happening in Washington, D.C. that has been passed. We have the Department of Defense has got a UFO task force put together, and reports have been written and delivered to Congress. It's on Fox News and Tucker Carlson and CNN every night. They're talking about UFOs and ETs and alien contact. This is the question. Our community is aware of all of this. Have you noticed this conversation in the media in Washington, D.C. about UFOs, or is it just because we're a part of the community and we know about it?
That's a good question. I feel like, like every a person probably goes through a period of fascination with UFOs. I certainly did when Whitley Strieber's books came out. I read all of them and I was fascinated by them, and then, kind of moved on to other subjects. But yeah, I have noticed more legitimate news stories recently, but have not delved into beyond the surface. But yeah, it seems like it's more par for the course now.
And are you surprised by that? In that, and Whitley's been a guest on this show. He's one of my close friends, and I love Whitley to death. He lives in, he lives here in L.A. And you're right. Communion did a lot. That was a big selling book.
It was.
Yeah, everybody read that book.
It was terrifying. It just it was really scary. I remember that was one of the books, that scared me more than any Stephen King book that I read.
I went through a period when I first got that book in the 80s. I would have to have it face down. I couldn't have that cover, man. Those eyes would follow me around my bedroom.
Yeah, I know. But I don't know. Are all aliens supposedly malevolent, or is there more of a sort of a broad spectrum, like human beings? I mean, what's kind of this consensus now?
And well, that's the question I'm going to ask you.
I don't know.
Well, in a world view, where the world is suddenly facing this stuff because it's in the news now, and the United States is in the Congress, and all of this is happening, and people pay attention to the media and the news and what goes on here in this country. Suddenly, people are talking about it. Do you? What's your take? Do you think we have something to be scared of, or not?
No, I don't think it's scary. If, there is other intelligent life here or watching us or about to arrive, I think it would be very interesting to, see what they have to say.
The universe is a big place, isn't it?
It certainly is. It's rather daunting when you think about it all.
It's really big, like infinite big. Right?
Yeah, there's no way we can be the only planet with intelligent life on it.
Do you think that's the world view now? Nobody's freaking out, right? The stock market's crash.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. It's not like a Twilight Zone episode.
And when you yeah, I know, right? When you think of ET, an extraterrestrial being, what pops into your mind? What do you see? What do you think of?
Well, personally, I think it could even be something that we don't recognize as an alien being. Maybe it doesn't look like anything that we recognize or know. I don't know if it looks like humanoid, like the Whitley Strieber's Greys. I don't know. It's hard to say, but probably not.
Do you think that we have been visited?
It's certainly possible. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so interested in speaking to somebody that, is outside of our community. Right.
Yeah. I'm not in the community, but I'm certainly open to believing that it's possible. Yeah. I think it's, probably rather arrogant to think that we're the only intelligent life in the entire universe.
Well, what is worse? what is worse, being alone in the universe or not, right? I think being alone would, if we were all that there is, that would scare the crap out of me. I don't like
Right? We haven't done a great job so far.
and here's the other part with that. The sudden friendliness with the media, right? All this ridicule, right? Tinfoil hats and we're crazy. But suddenly there's this friendly side of this now where it's out in the open and it's being discussed, which may suggest that the government knows more than they are telling us. They're saying that we're trying to figure it out. But do you think that the government is sitting on information and they know the truth?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess it depends on which branch of the government you're talking about. Some may be more open than others.
Have you heard of, I love this. This is awesome for me. Have you heard of the Roswell case?
You mean the original Roswell Area 51 or a recent one?
That's two different areas.
Okay.
Area 51 is Nevada, just north of you.
Oh, yeah. And then Roswell is New Mexico?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. See, I know one or two things.
Yeah, you're up on stuff. I'm going to be, I have a big event that's going on at the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas in November. And you're invited.
I would love to come.
I would love to have you out there. It's a big event. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is on Saturday night, we're going to load up 4 buses and we're going to go to Area 51.
I've never been there.
Yeah. Well, neither have I. So let's go there together and crash those gates and get around.
Sounds like a party.
But the reason why I bring up Roswell is that allegedly, I believe that had happened, that a flying saucer crashed there and we recovered it. And that was in 1947. And after that, all the technology started to happen, right? We started to, and maybe we got this stuff from this craft. And if that's the case, then obviously the government would know that. I just want your opinion. If that actually happened, would you expect our government to admit to something like that? Or is that a secret that they just need to keep squashed?
What would be the harm in admitting it if it were a fact?
See, this is why you're a guest on this show. There's an argument here for both sides, right? That there's some complicity, maybe some legal issues that if the government did have this technology and didn't share it with the world, that heat schools, food production, right, and all of that, and but maybe they should if they have information. The reason why I'm bringing this up, there's an article in Newsweek that came out yesterday, and Representative Tim Burchett of Congress said to Newsweek, this is yesterday, that we have a flying saucer, and we're backwards engineering it, and we may even have alien beings. Right, this is in Newsweek, Staci.
Wow, I have to check that out.
Yeah.
So is that why the technology accelerated so quickly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s to now? I mean, when you think about 100 years in the 1800s, and then you go to the 1900s, and how quickly technology accelerated exponentially, and so like never before in history. Do you think that's because of the supposed crash in Roswell? And
yeah, well,
is that the idea?
So check this out. That's a great point. 1900, right? The year 1900. Gas lamps and horse and buggies.
Exactly.
Right? The airplane hadn't happened yet, right? Henry Ford is still a few years out. Okay, so that's 1900. 60 years later, we had the Ventures.
And we're on the moon. Yeah, exactly. In fact,
yeah.
The Ventures in Space is a great album. Everyone should listen to it.
But that's the exact point that you're making.
Yeah, it is definitely something to question and to delve into.
Were the Ventures? I'm just going to stay right here for a second. They kind of represented the future, didn't they? They
absolutely.
showed it, right?
Yeah, I mean they did. They're I think the only rock band that did an album for NASA that was commissioned by NASA to do an album. Yeah, they were always very forward thinking. They came up with the rise of the electric guitar, and that's I think that went hand in hand why the electric guitar became so popular. Although of course it came about before that, but really the Ventures were the ones to kind of bring it into the mainstream, and it quickly caught on to other bands. And then I think it kind of, both of them went hand in hand. The Ventures wouldn't have been as popular without the electric guitar, and the electric guitar would not have been as popular without the Ventures.
No, that's a fact. It's a fact. And here's the other part though, that when you have the vision of, you go to 1960, 61, 62, 58, where we had this, the house of the future, the car of the future, that everything was convenient and automated, and the Jetsons. And
exactly. Yeah, I was just going to say the Jetsons for sure, the flying car.
And that's what the Ventures represented. That music was part of the vision of what we could be, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you listen to Les Paul, who's really probably the most associated with the electric guitar and just an incredibly talented person who luckily I got to meet through my dad. But you listen to his music with Mary Ford in the 50s, it doesn't sound as forward as the Ventures. They really did bring it to a different level.
Oh, they did. Les Paul, everybody. These are all Les Paul guitars.
Yeah, what a wonderful man. He was just such a great person. And I feel really privileged that I got to meet him. I mean, he's a legend.
You want me to tell you my Les Paul story?
Yes.
I got one. It's not as cool as yours. It's not as cool as yours. I did a lot of public speaking. Oh, I still do. And I would lose my voice. Now I've learned how to control it because of Les Paul. And this is what happened. So this is like 1995. And I'm in New York, and I'm speaking at the Javits Center, right? This convention center in New York, the AES convention. And I had lost my voice that day. And so Les Paul comes up and he starts talking to me, and we're in our booth, a big booth, big thing. And I go, I can't talk. And he goes, oh, really? What's going on? I said, man, I've been talking all day, and I got to do this thing tonight. So right now he goes, I've got the secret. I said, what's that? He goes, Ricola. I said, what? He goes, Ricola, the cough drops, right? So he takes a handful out of his pocket and gives them to me. And he goes, you'll be able to talk by tonight. I still have one of those Ricolas that he gave me in 19.
Nice.
It's one of my prized possessions. It's in my jewelry box upstairs. This old Ricola.
Oh, man. Is it the square one?
Yeah, in the wrapper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All because of Les Paul. And now I keep Ricolas in my luggage. I take them to all the conferences, and that's what I do. And that's my Les Paul story. It's true, and I'm sticking by it.
Yeah, he was a really just a very approachable, open, friendly guy. He would talk to anybody. He was being legendary as he was, you'd think he might be a little more guarded, but no, he was wonderful right to the end.
What was Joni Mitchell like? Can I ask you that? This is a personal question, but
Yeah, well, and that's another person that I got to meet through my dad and interviewed her for her. She received a Lifetime Achievement Award. So that was actually a phone interview that I did. But when I met her in person, she was actually not doing too well health wise. So she was in a wheelchair. But I met her during NAM. It was the NEC Awards, I believe, and she received a Lifetime Achievement Award. And yeah, I mean, it was really great to meet her because, of course, as a young girl in my teens and tweens, of course, every girl goes through a Joni Mitchell period, and her lyrics just always really resonated with me. So, I'm sure I'm like the who knows, 20,000th person to say how much her music meant to me. But I always feel like it's important to tell the people who made an impression on you to give them that accolade that they deserve. And she graciously accepted it. And so, yeah, I didn't talk to her for long in person, but when I did the phone interview with her, yeah, we talked a lot about how the music business has changed since she came up. And also, as a woman, one of the things that I thought was interesting to talk to her about was how Rolling Stone, I believe in the 70s, they ran a story about like all the men that she had slept with. And it was just so dismissive and so disrespectful. They wouldn't do a story on a man like that. They wouldn't have like a list of all the women that he slept with, but they did that to her. And that was really hurtful to her. And so we talked about that.
And here we are, and it's International Women's Day today.
It is. Yes, it is.
I meant to mention that at the top of the show. I was just so excited to have you with us that I forgot to drop that. Yeah, today is International Women's Day, and you're an author, you're a director, and all the things that you are. Power to the women.
Right. And had some great role models like Joni Mitchell, They've definitely paved the way for a lot of women to do the things that they want to do and to express themselves artistically.
Have you seen, we're going to move on in a second, but have you seen Daisy Jones and the Six?
I only watched the first episode. I did read the book, and I didn't really like the book. I didn't care for the oral history style that the author used, but I am curious to see it. It's definitely, I can already see the Fleetwood Mac vibes there.
It's definitely for me. Look, it's Laurel Canyon. They live on Laurel Canyon, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've got all the clubs in there. It's really funny how they mentioned just about everything, right? Gazaris and
well, it's funny how they have her in the Troubadour, but it's a completely different interior. There's no way the Troubadour is that big. It's kind of funny if you know.
Yeah,
if you know, you know.
Yeah. If you know, you know. There is a documentary that came out 2017, 2018, Linda Ronstadt, In My Own Voice. And so when you watch that, and it's a great documentary. It's all about Laurel Canyon.
I've seen it, yeah. In fact, Michelle Farinola, who is one of the producers on it, and she's a friend of mine, she actually gave me a recipe for my Rock Tales book. So, yeah, and she also produced David Crosby, Remember My Name, which is the incident that I got to interview David Crosby, which was wonderful.
And so that whole... when we talk about all of those bands in that scene, Laurel Canyon is where it was at. It just that's it. So where you have the Linda Ronstadt, the Eagles, and I could just go down the list.
Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, yeah, all those.
Jackson Brown, and you know, so all of that, and then Daisy Jones and the Six. It's kind of like an amalgamation. It is. It's got a Fleetwood Mac, but it's got the Eagles, Linda Ronstadt, thing, Laurel Kent. Yeah, Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Now, since you love conspiracy theories, have you read the book Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon?
I've heard of it.
You'll love it. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Give me a little taste.
Well, they do have quite a few conspiracy theories that I didn't think about. How many rock stars came from military families, and it kind of goes into some of that, and also how many cover-ups there were with murders in Laurel Canyon. So I think it's something you should definitely check out.
My studio in the 80s was on Laurel Canyon. It was right behind the Coconut Teaser. Okay, right there on Selma. All right.
Hmm.
And so, yes, and I had all of my friends that lived up there. And there is a certain vibe that you get on that street and the history. It's Houdini, right? I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. My friend actually got married at the Houdini Mansion, and I've been there too, and it's a great place. But yeah, I may not be sensitive to ghostly presences, but I have to say that anytime I'm at Laurel Canyon, and I used to house sit there, yeah, you just kind of soak in that creative beauty and atmosphere, and it really is a different feel there. It's a very unusual place.
And it hasn't changed.
No.
It hasn't.
Yeah, I
It
mean, they
just.
still got the Laurel Canyon store there, and Jim Morrison used to live above it. And yeah,
What was that place that was called? Was it the Ranch Market? What was it called?
I think it's just called the Laurel Canyon store. And then
Is that
there's
what it's called?
yeah, and that's right by Jim Morrison called it Love Street, where he wrote the song about she lives on Love Street, and you can walk down that street and really kind of soak up the rock and roll ghosts.
It looks the same. It
does.
has.
Yeah.
You drive there.
I do
now.
love that. Yeah, I mean, because for a city that has so much history to it, Hollywood loves to tear places down. So it's nice that Laurel Canyon really hasn't changed that much.
No, it's totally retained it. Totally retained it.
Yeah.
Now, okay. So Rob Zombie.
Hmm.
Here's the thing. When we talk about the paranormal and everything else, if there is somebody that really embraces it, it's Rob. In his directing too, as well. But the songs, the theatrics on the stage, he knows how do I say this? Get to our scary parts. He does it really well.
Yeah, that's another person that, well, I've interviewed many, many times because I did specialize in the horror genre when I was an entertainment reporter. Like I said, I worked for the Sci-Fi Channel. I also worked for horror.com, Dread Central. So yeah, he was on a lot of my shows, and I went to visit his sets quite a few times. Yeah, he's just a super creative, very, very intelligent person. And I feel like he still has yet to make his greatest film.
Oh man, 1,000 Corpses.
Ooh, yeah, that is one scary film.
Strong film. The set from that, the Four Aces Motel, it's right up the street from where I live.
Wow.
Yeah, and I drove out there. I don't do stuff like this too often, but I had to go see it. And there it is, the Four Aces Motel, man. It's right out here in Palmdale.
Yeah, he's definitely a historian of the bizarre and unusual. So,
where do you think it comes from?
For him or for anyone?
No, for him. No, for him specifically, because he does it right. He does it right. He captures the visual in his movies, but also he's able to. It's the theater of the mind in his songs. And then
right. I feel like it's maybe it's his generation. I mean, he and I were born in the same year, I believe, 66. So, being Gen X, we just kind of grew up in that era of the 70s as you're a young child, kind of the popular books then were The Exorcist, there was the Omen, Rosemary's Baby, like I said, Helter Skelter. Yeah, I mean, we all read those books when we were far too young probably to read them. So I think that all kind of soaks into one's consciousness. And I think it's more a generational thing than an individual thing. And being a creative person, I think he kind of latched onto that and found ways to exploit it creatively. I mean, certainly his songs that he did with White Zombie are very, very horror centric. And, the films, the Universal horror monsters and the Munsters and all those things that we grew up with in that era, he's really embraced and kind of brought out to the world in a creative way.
I saw him I'm trying to think, probably around 2000, right? 2001, 2000.
Mhm.
And at the Universal Amphitheater, right? And I'm a guest. My friend is opening. They're on tour, so I'm there and I'm backstage. I'm doing my thing. And when I stood at the mixing board and watched his show right in the center, and the Universal Amphitheater, right? That center aisle.
Yep.
And I was right there at the mixing console. And I watched that entire show. It scared the crap out of me.
Even scarier than Alice Cooper.
It's a rock concert. And the robots and the things and the puppets and the flames and the dancing girls in front of the flame and the thing.
Right.
And every song was this huge, bombastic Barnum and Bailey, every song, right? And these giant 3-story robots and the monsters. And I was terrified. It was awesome. For him to be able to put that together, to combine the music with putting on this stage show was tremendous. But there was this vision where this creativity, where this is coming from. And I'm telling you, yeah, it did its job. It was really well done. He okay, so House of a Thousand Corpses, you remember it was rated X.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I actually covered the red carpet for that film.
Okay.
Yeah, I prefer The Devil's Rejects, though.
It was about the same for me. Yeah, you're right. You're right about that. But the hype behind House of a Thousand Corpses, right? So
right, wasn't that his directorial debut? So that was a big deal.
It was a big deal. So he's on stage. Were you at that show?
No.
Okay. So he announces on stage, it's rated X. They won't let me release it into theaters, but I'm going to play you tonight the stuff that they don't want you to see. And then he rolls into a song, and now we've got it on the big screens, right? It was like, man, dude, where are you coming from with this? It was just awesome. It was just awesome.
That was great. I mean, yeah, you can definitely see his cinematic influences. Definitely the Sam Peckinpah, the long shot on the person that's about to be shot, and it kind of zooms way out and taking his time with it. And then also could definitely see shades of The Fun House, directed by Tobe Hooper. So yeah, I mean, he really wears his influences on his sleeve, but he does make it his own in really only Rob Zombie can direct a Rob Zombie film.
Yeah, I don't want to. The reason why I'm dragging this out with Rob is that I think all of us can imagine certain things, but it takes a director or a writer, like yourself, to take it to the next level so we can experience it. And he's not afraid to do that, to cross those cinematic lines that others, they just don't, or they don't have the ability to do that. And he can visually, it's the makeup, it's the shot, it's the framing, very little special effects. This is all stuff that is filmed, and
Right.
and he's just been able to do that with dramatic effect.
Not to mention the actors that he cast: Sid Haig, Bill Moseley, Sherry Moon Zombie was great as Baby Firefly in all the films. So yeah, I mean, that's also part of it, is in the casting.
Yeah, Sid Haig. And I'm going to tell you something. Sid Haig, when you see his other stuff, right? Okay, all right, and you go through his history, he took it and ran with it with Rob Zombie.
He did. Yeah. I mean, was a very interesting person. I got to know him pretty well, and actually he invited me to his wedding, which was a great honor. It was a very traditional wedding, nothing too crazy. It was not at the Houdini Mansion, but but he really was, he was a licensed hypnotherapist. I think he ran for president once. He did costume design. He was in a lot of the Jack Hill movies in the 70s, those exploitation, women in prison films, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. So he had a very, very storied life. So when he plays Captain Spaulding, he brings all that gravitas and all that knowledge to that character. You can really see a lot going on behind his eyes, which I think is very, very wise on Rob Zombie's part to cast people like that who have that life experience that they can bring to a role.
I can't remember what it was, but it was like Perry Mason or something, one of those 70s crime series. And he played a judge.
Yeah. Well, he was also, wasn't he the judge in the Quentin Tarantino, Jackie, Jackie Brown.
Yeah, he was in that. Yeah. That's right. I forgot about that. I forgot. The Munsters. I love the movie.
Did you? I couldn't get through it, to be honest with you, but hey, you got to give him props for taking on such beloved series. Not everyone's going to love it, but he really went for it.
Man, I've had so many of my friends say the exact same thing. Nope. I stopped watching it. I watched it back to back. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Well, good. I mean, I never want to argue with people that if I didn't like something and they liked it, I'm glad that you liked it. That's what people, when you're a filmmaker, you want people to like what you're doing. So I'm glad that a lot of people did like it.
Okay, you're being too politically correct here. I respect that. I do. But I didn't understand everybody's negative take on it because I didn't see that. I thought it was done with respect. I thought it was funny as all get out. The Munsters was always a comedy series.
Oh yeah. It's definitely not a highbrow comedy. And to begin with, it was, just a silly show. I'm more of an Addams Family person, so maybe that's why.
Oh man, I wanted to. I'm going to swing back to the strip for a second. When did you have this? Just for me, did you have a favorite band that you used to go and see? And also, at the same time, we can always talk about Aquanet and spandex and compete. But at the same time, there was a very vibrant punk scene that was going on. In Hollywood at the same time. So who were you going to go see? Who were your favorite bands?
I was more of like a flower child when I was a young teenager. So I never really got into either the hair bands or the punk bands. I was kind of like wishing that the Doors were still touring. So, but you know how it is when you're a kid and you've got a fake ID, of course, you're going to go see every band that you can. And in retrospect, I certainly appreciate that I got to see so many great shows. One of the most interesting shows that I saw was Wasp at the Troubadour. I believe it was a Halloween night, and it was a pretty crazy show with Blackie Lawless and his buzzsaw codpiece at eye level. You're right there at the front of the stage. So that was a pretty wild thing to see when you're a teenager. And I saw, I saw the Go-Go's and the Plimsolls, and I saw a lot of the sort of new wave bands. I never really got too much into punk. I'm really a melody and a lyrics person, so I'm not really into the punk too much, but I certainly appreciate a lot of the bands, especially the older bands.
I'm confused. Melody and Flower Child and Wasp and Black.
I went to see them just because it was all I could see. The Doors weren't available at the time.
I've seen Blackie. It's Chris Holmes, old friend of mine, and you're right. That was about theatrics.
Yeah, it's a fun band to see. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you remember? So I walked in. This is 1984, and Gina Zamparelli takes me to the Troubadour to go see a band called Ruby Slippers.
Oh yeah, I do remember that band. Mhm.
Oh, I had no idea. So I was I was a Van Halen guy, right? I was about putting on the show and being, I was not ready for what Ruby Slippers was. And so and the place was packed. The Troubadour was just, man, I thought, well, who is this band? Right. And they come out and they're all transvestites, right?
Yeah, well, kind of New York Dolls kind of
New
vibe,
York
right?
Dolls. Right,
Yeah.
right. Fishnets and high heels and garters, and and I was like, whoa, and they were awesome. They were a great band, and that's the part of Hollywood that is just it's gone. I think just like any era, you don't know that you're part of a scene like that because it's just happening. You know what I mean? And you can't force something like that to happen. It happens organically. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a very short period in music history when you really think back to the glam rock days. It was not that many years that it lasted, but now it's come back. I mean, what was the new book? The Ain't Nothing But a Good Time. That really kind of brings it back to people are listening to these bands again, and it's having sort of a resurgence.
yeah, I agree with you. I do. Well, Daisy Jones and the Six is definitely exposing. Do you feel, that's such a great point, that the art of the band has been missing? Right? The band, a real, drums, bass, guitar, right? And a real singer, maybe even playing at the same time in a studio to record an album.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I recently had Todd Kearns on my podcast, and he was talking about the latest album that he made with his new band, Heroes and Monsters, and how nobody was in the same room at the same time. And I was kind of joking about how, we hear about the legendary fights between Fleetwood Mac or the Eagles, and, they're all in the studio at the same time. And we're not going to have these great stories, 10, 20 years from now about bands that are making music now. There's just not that same contact, that same being physically together, making music.
I'm wearing a Black Sabbath shirt, right?
I see that. Yes.
Yeah. I'm wearing a Black Sabbath shirt. And today I was watching a Black Sabbath documentary about the making of was it Volume 4 or Masters of Reality, right? I'm watching this. And Geezer Butler said, and I've heard him say this before, but when you hear it again, it just kind of soaks in. He goes, well, our biggest hit, Paranoid, we just needed 3 more minutes of songs, on the record. So we wrote that and recorded it, and we're done in 25 minutes. That only happens if you're in the studio as a band, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there's something about the alchemy of creative people all working together, and there's just something to be said about being physically present that it just adds a different dimension to music. I mean, it's not to say that music that's all recorded separately is not good, but I don't know how lasting it will be.
Well, there's a creative process. I will never say that there isn't there is an art to creating on a drum machine. There's an art to, that's an artistic process. So, NWA or Ice Cube or whatever, they're not any less of an artist than anybody else. It's a creative process and it's a tool. I get that. Mm-hmm. But there is something to be said to something like, the Ventures or Elvis or Led Zeppelin setting up with a couple of mics and letting this thing rip. And you you get a vibe from that, don't you? That's the way.
Different. I mean, you can get a vibe, definitely. I recently read Phil Collins' memoir, and he was talking about how when drum machines came out, and he was very skeptical, but then he embraced it. Okay, so you listen to In the Air Tonight, and that's, that you could never get that sound, and it definitely draws you in, and it's its own thing. But, give me a Neil Peart drum fill any day of the week. I'd rather hear that. But I love them both, for different reasons. But yeah, there's something to be said just about a real drummer that I am drawn to. But I'm not saying it's better or, worse than anything else. It really depends on what resonates with the listener. And that's why there's so many different forms of music.
I love this conversation tonight. And I've been watching the chat room, and you've dropped some really cool things tonight, and I watched the reactions, right? Neil Peart, Scott Ian, Yngwie Malmsteen was mentioned on the show tonight. And how cool is that? Yngwie played out here, and so I got invited out and got to hang out with him for a minute. He signed one of my guitars over there. And this is what I did with him. He knew, who I was and stuff before we started talking. But I said, so UFOs, and this is in the dressing room. And he looked up and he started, and then he stopped. He didn't say what he wanted to say. There was something. It was a weird moment. And later on, I was with my friends outside. Did you guys catch that? He wanted to say something, but he caught himself. He caught the words before they came out of his mouth.
That's a rare trait.
Yeah. But I thought he was going to go there for a second. But there's when you mention these things with somebody like Yngwie, back to Ron Keel, right? That has such a powerful influence on people and other guitar players, but he's only known in a very narrow, you know what I mean? It's really strange with certain artists that don't, burst out. My mom doesn't know who Yngwie Malmsteen is, right? But Elvis is known around the world, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with somebody like Yngwie, I've often wondered if that's if it's frustrating or if they're aware of it.
That's a good question. I don't know. He is in Rock and Roll Nightmares Volume 1 for spousal abuse. Maybe he was letting out his frustration on, I don't know. These guys, they do act out in some ways that maybe that's what it's all about. But no, I feel like he's revered for what he wants to be revered for. I mean, it's definitely a very unique, almost gymnastic guitar style, which I appreciate. I do like a fancy guitar player. I love Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, but really, I mean, to me, like the sort of loose, sloppy, bluesy guitar playing of Keith Richards or Jimmy Page, that's really what resonates with me. That's what speaks to my soul. So I feel like, you can appreciate all different kinds of styles, but really what resonates with your heart and soul is, what people are drawn to, and different people are drawn to different things for different reasons. I'm not a guitar player, so I just go to what really kind of draws me in. Earlier today, I was listening to Pink Floyd, and that guitar playing I don't know, it just does something to you. It speaks to you emotionally.
Yeah. And David Gilmour said more with one note than most guitar players do with 100.
Yeah.
It's really true. It's a tone, but it's also the note choices and his solo work. When his guitar solos, they emotionally slap you upside the head. You pay attention. And,
it just really speaks to you. I mean, everything comes together with that.
Let me. I'm going to turn this around just a little bit. there's something to be said about some of the most influential people come in and change everything, and then they leave us. Prince, Elvis, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, where they come in and they visit us for these brief periods of time. And absolutely, there is a period before Amy Winehouse, there's a period after. You know what I mean? There's a period.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the same thing, Hendrix, there's music before Hendrix, there's music after Hendrix.
Well, I mean, to me, that's almost like a metaphorical alien visitation, right? Because this person is almost otherworldly. They're here for a short time and then they're gone, but they leave that residue of something that we didn't know before. It's almost, like I said, like a metaphorical alien visitation.
You said it, not me. I drew it out of you. But that's where I'm going with that. Somebody just brought up Janis Joplin. After everything we said tonight, we didn't speak about Janis Joplin, but that's another example of that, right? Where that genius comes in, absolutely changes the world, and then they leave us. Yeah. It happens more times than not.
Right. Well, it's like the Neil Young lyric and, Kurt Cobain's suicide note. It's better to burn out than fade away.
Man, I have said many times that Jimi Hendrix had to have been an alien. And if so, and I don't really say it in jest. He was so different. Prince is another great example of that. Elvis is an amazing example of that. And Amy Winehouse, completely different, right? Completely different. And we're not afraid to be different. And then gone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder.
It does. It does. Where can everybody go and see your films and get your books?
Well, the books are all on Amazon.com. They're also on Audible. So if you're not a reader, you can listen to a lot of my books on Audible. There's my website, which is my name, StaciLayneWilson.com. So that kind of is you can go from there to all my social media accounts and everything. The films, The Venture Stars on Guitars is actually just went free worldwide on YouTube. So people can watch that just by punching in The Venture Stars on Guitars on YouTube. And it's on the music documentary channel worldwide, which is really great.
Right now, Venture Stars on Guitars is on YouTube?
It is.
I'm going to put the link in right now. You know what? Bill, Zenzabil, Genocide, pop that link up in the chat. And that's really cool. So that is.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I want everyone to be able to watch it, so that's really exciting. And then the Second Age of Aquarius, which is a sci-fi rock and roll comedy that I was talking about with the fictional character member of the 27 Club. My writing partner, Darren Gordon Smith, who did Repo the Genetic Opera, which you may have seen. It's a sci-fi horror musical. So he wrote all the music, and it's really fun. It's period correct 60s songs that are in that film. So that is on Tubi and Vudu and Prime. And really am excited about that film, which came out just about a year ago. And then I have another movie coming out called Night of the Mannequins, which is kind of like Tourist Trap meets The Panic Room. And so that's not a rock and roll film, but it's more of a horror movie. And that'll be out in a few months.
Do you have a release date yet?
Not yet.
Okay. When you have that, I want to see it, but then I want to get you back on the show and let's talk about it.
That'd be fantastic.
Staci, what a great man. Just a perfect night on the show for me. It's just all of my favorite subjects.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
It's just a great show. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Staci Layne Wilson. And it is StaciLayneWilson.com. The links are below, of course, over on our website, and we have them up throughout social media. And the venture Stars on Guitars, I didn't know. It is now free on YouTube. Everybody go and check it out. I think we've got it up in the chat now. So everybody go and check it out. Tomorrow night, what have I got going on tomorrow night? Oh, Elizabeth Hoekstra is with us. We will be talking about her new book, which is The Mother Earth Effect. All of that is tomorrow night right here. And I've got her co-author, Olivia Ramirez Smith, is joining us too as well. All right. So that's tomorrow night. And then we just head into a nice long weekend. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew, the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. And this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2023 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night with Elizabeth Hoekstra and Olivia Smith, I want you to be safe. Go back, Lee Tappy.